Hello, survivors. My name is Sim, and I'm a virtual consultant with Survivor to Victor Consulting. I provide online support to victims of narcissistic abuse, empowering them to overcome the narcissistic tactics used on them by educating them on what those actual tactics are. Today, we have a special guest in the building for you. We have the illustrious and charming Miss Marissa Price. Marissa, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Marissa Price. I am a social worker, healer, educator, specifically educating Black women about how to start and grow online businesses, inspired by Exodus Summit 2022 Move Abroad Money that gave us all the tools on how to start online businesses. It's been over a year now, left a toxic job in economic development and kind of taking my skill set and helping Black women start businesses on my own terms.
Wow, you have a lot going on, Marissa. I applaud you.
Thank you.
I have to share with you that both you, Dr. Kamani, and the anti-HR lady, you all inspired me to leave my toxic job. I'm a toxic job survivor for almost 20 years. And I decided back in October to leave after, again, going through a toxic experience. And I've had several. And I've retired now. I haven't figured out really if I'm on sabbatical or if I'm really retired. I'm of the age where I can retire, but I don't know. It's been great being off, and I really can't imagine going back. But we'll have to see where that goes, actually. How long ago did you experience this toxic?
I think it was, over a year, a little over a year ago. At this point, I left, and I was in that role for about 3 years. And it was about maybe a year and a half into that role that it became toxic, because it didn't start off toxic. Yeah, just given additional work that was really draining, not having the proper support, and kind of falling down the spiral of depression and trying to work harder to get people's approval. It was a lot. It was a lot. So I'm still in the process of healing and recovering from that.
I'm sure. How were you able to maneuver your way out of that situation?
I think the first thing was really therapy. So I started therapy using the employee assistance program that my employer had offered. So starting that, because I went into therapy originally thinking something was wrong with me, asking her, are there tools that I can use to stop the anxiety I'm feeling in these meetings? Because every time the specific meeting would roll around, I would just be out of sorts. I would have to do it every week, log on to this meeting. So I came into therapy seeking tools to cope with that. And in the process of unpacking the type of environment that I was in, my therapist reflected back to me, I think it's the environment. I don't think anything's wrong with you. Because a lot of us will have that tendency to internalize what's happening to us externally as something is wrong with us. But her being able to reflect that back to me, I'm like, oh, it is the environment. So that kind of started the transition out. And then coming upon Dr. Kamani's channel, Lifting as We Climb Consulting on YouTube, being in the chat with other Black women, sharing our stories, realizing how similar what I was going through was to other Black women who were sharing their stories, and realizing that there was a pattern at play here, and then I could get out with the resources she shared.
Well, let me ask you this, because in my situation, when I would talk to my therapist about it, I got the impression that they felt like I was overreacting, or the environment, it was all in my mind. They did this type of, okay, well, what's going on with you that might cause it, So was your therapist a Black woman?
She wasn't. She was Latina.
She understood, maybe because she was a person of color. But my therapist was of the Caucasian persuasion, and she didn't, when I would talk about how I thought this was a toxic work environment and that there was some underlying racism involved, she tried to steer me away from that, which was very unfortunate, because I decided to stay in the job longer than I should.
Right.
So you had that support.
Yeah. And I'll just share that I've had that experience too in therapy, and being in the mental health field. There's this thing that especially Black therapists and Indigenous therapists have been bringing to the forefront: cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a therapy modality that is used when you're experiencing these cognitive distortions, or ways that our brain goes down thought patterns that cause even more anxiety and depression. But in the process of using that modality, gaslighting can come into effect. So you're essentially gaslighting your clients that are coming in seeking, being able to reflect that back is powerful. But if you're coming from the standpoint of wanting to change someone's mindset around something that's actually harming them, that's a problem. So yes, I've experienced that too. And I think more of us who are in the mental health field need to bring awareness to that, because that's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because she seemed to be thinking I had some type of cognitive distortion, and I was perceiving my experience incorrectly. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience with the toxic work environment?
Yeah, so I entered into this work environment as an intern in graduate school. So I do have a master's degree in social work, and I thought this was my dream job, right? So I had all the hopes, dreams of, oh, I finally found a place where I can be myself, where I can contribute my talents, a place that felt safe, and then kind of being thrown into the lion's den without a lot of protection because it was in the middle of the pandemic. So we all went remote. So I was kind of disconnected from people who probably would have been able to step in when I was being bullied. But since I was by myself in a remote environment, the bullying was able to take effect without anyone being able to step in to help me or protect me. So it was that, being given additional responsibilities outside of the job that I agreed to do, fighting to be paid for that role, constantly encountering roadblocks, gaslighting, telling me essentially that I should be happy with what I'm receiving, even though a part of me knew. And that was kind of where the depression started, because I knew that this was wrong. And yet everyone around me was telling me that I should be okay with it. But I knew, a lot of us know, we have that feeling. It's no, this isn't right. So I kept speaking up, kept getting pushback at every turn, really being tasked leading a strategy, a racial equity strategy at a major institution right out of graduate school. So I was already being set up without the proper support in this institution where a lot of people did not get the issues as I did, having a background in Black studies, being a Black woman, and having to be the face of these issues and try to educate. All of this was like a perfect storm, being isolated during the pandemic, not having the proper support, eventually, receiving the diagnosis of major depressive disorder from my therapist because of the job, having to take FMLA leave to take a sabbatical, which was life-changing. Being able to take time off work because I didn't even know that was a possibility. But being able to take that time off and do nothing and really heal and travel outside of the US for the first time really made me understand what I was in was not normal. And there was a different way to live. And I think that's so powerful and freeing, especially for Black women.
Oh, yeah, of course. You mentioned some of the gaslighting that went on. Can you tell me what types of gaslighting they used? Typically manipulation and trying to make you feel that you weren't up to par. Was that a part of it?
Yeah. So when it came to salary discussions, me giving all of this, the reasons why I should be paid, it was kind of I'm doing 2 roles. Of course, my salary should be increased. But me giving the details, the reasoning, thinking that was going to change something, and then being told that, no, you're good. You should be able to accept what you're already being paid. So questioning my perception of reality is really how it showed up. And that can be, like I said, spiral you right into depression. When someone questions your reality, especially as a sensitive person, I can feel things very deeply. So being in that environment, constantly running into people who would say just off the wall things and trying to convince me that when I did speak up against that nothing was wrong with it. That was just kind of par for the course in the industry I was in. No, that's not what I signed up for. So that deep questioning of what you're experiencing leads you to then question yourself. And self-gaslighting is where it gets really scary, because now you're not even sure which way is up, which way is down. Because everyone around you is questioning what you're perceiving and the feedback that you're giving that's actually rooted in reality, but because they don't want to acknowledge that what you're saying is true.
Can you give some examples of some of the worst types of gaslighting? I mean, examples of what was actually done to you?
Yeah, so aside from the salary discussion, and I apologize because a lot of this is still foggy. I have a lot of trauma still around this experience. So being able to recall like specific incidences is kind of difficult for me sometimes. But yeah, specific instances of gaslighting. That being in meetings where, again, people said really anti-Black things. And me being the only Black person on the team, and then everyone else kind of just brushing it off as if nothing happened. Meanwhile, I'm here, my chest is burning, because that's always one of the ways I can tell that I'm offended and I'm disrespected. Checking in with my body, like, my chest is burning. This is not right. But no one around me was responding to that. And a lot of us, I know, experience that in workplaces, being in rooms where your person, your community is being disrespected, especially in like helping spaces. As a social worker, the anti-Blackness is very real in a lot of these places. And we are trying to help our clientele heal, get access to spaces that have traditionally been inaccessible, while also battling these very systemic issues within the organization.
So you kind of touched on something that happens a lot, especially that's more kind of devastating for us as Black women, when this type of treatment comes from people that look like us. So did you experience any of this gaslighting and manipulation from skin folk?
So I did. Yeah, I guess when I shared what was happening to me, the organization that I was in, a lot of people were afraid to speak up about what they had actually experienced because it paid well. And the golden handcuffs are very real when it comes to these organizations. Good benefits, keeps us in a lot of workplaces that are very toxic to our spirits. And I know, like, as a truth teller, speaking up, a lot of the times you're alone because no one else wants to experience what they know that you're about to experience, speaking up about something that's real and that's happening. So I did experience that kind of not being supported by other Black employees that I thought were supposed to be protecting me, all the way from being an intern at this organization to an employee. And those people really didn't stand up in the way that I needed them to when I shared what was actually happening behind the scenes, because they didn't want to risk their own position. Yeah.
Yeah. And you find a lot of times in situations like that, the people that you had developed relationships with will actually turn on you. Sometimes work against you, was my experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, that whole pet is a threat.
Oh, yes.
And it just amazes me when you're hired for a job, you would think that people would want you to come in and use your skills and you know, be able to utilize what you know.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, this whole colonialism thing that, you know, they just want to see us working at a certain level, it seems. So
no, that's true. Right. Coming in, being brought in for all these credentials that I had accumulated, all these degrees for my expertise in this field, and then me contributing, right, actually fulfilling my job description. Now all of a sudden I have people looking at me like, are you trying to take my job? No, I don't want your job. But that's like the pet to threat. And I think a lot of us have realized that we've experienced this in the workplace, being brought in, right, for being brilliant, and then also being harmed, traumatized for being brilliant because it triggers other people's insecurities.
exactly.
Yeah, you're being set up.
It's a shame. You mentioned that you had a lot of trauma around work. Can you talk a little bit about what an actual trauma response is?
Yes. So a trauma response is an involuntary, unconscious response. So we're not even aware that this is happening to our bodies, but this is when we perceive a threat in our external environment. So this is something our body naturally does, right? But the more we can kind of bring our awareness to what is happening to our bodies, the more that we are able to change our behaviors and our reactions to things that we may view as threatening. But trauma responses fall into 4 categories typically. So the first being fight, which is trying to establish power over the threat. Flight, which is escaping from the threat, so running away. Freezing, which is detaching mentally from the threat. And this is where dissociation comes into play. So if you have this trauma response, you may kind of feel like your body's present, but my mind is like way over here. And this may be, especially in childhood, because a lot of this goes back to childhood trauma. If you were not able to leave a traumatic environment, which as kids, we don't have the ability to do, our brains will kind of go into this like self-protective mode, right? Where our bodies are here, but our brains are like shut off. So you may be detached from what people are saying to you, detached from your emotions. And this can be the freeze trauma response, can fall into that category. And the last one is fawn. So this is trying to appeal to the threat. And this shows up as people pleasing. So when you're trying to appeal to someone who's harming you, trying to guess what they need, putting their needs over your own trauma response. And yeah, it shows up, like I said, people pleasing, trying to anticipate things that you can't, trying to mind read to stay safe from that threat. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I fell somewhere in between freeze and respond, because I found that speaking up is what almost draws that target, draws them in to talk to you. And so I stopped speaking up because I felt like they were trying to get me to react to something. So I said, okay, well, I'm not going to react, even though they're doing everything they can to try to get a rage out of me. And we don't want them to have that whole angry Black woman. So I would ignore what was being said and have to really calm myself not to react. But in doing so, I was pushing a lot of my feelings down, which ended up making me very anxious and caused me to fall into a deep depression. So, but that people pleasing, why is that considered a trauma response?
So that will fall under the fawn. So when you're trying to, again, anticipate other people's needs, you're completely ignoring yourself in this equation because you perceive the threat. The threat of the other person, but you're trying to please your way out of that threat to protect yourself, to preserve a sense of safety. And trauma responses are really instinctual. They're rooted in, like, if a wild animal was coming after you, this is how your body would naturally react. But because we stay in these when, like, in an environment that threat may not actually be there, this is where kind of it can get a little hairy when you are still operating in these trauma responses, how your body would naturally respond to a threat. Because something in your new environment is similar to what you experienced before, you're still operating in that, and you're not even consciously aware of that. So this is where people pleasing, we try to protect ourselves against a threat by avoiding conflict altogether. Again, putting someone else's needs over your own, not saying no when you know that you don't want to do something, you know that you're tired, and you still say yes. That fawn trauma response, again, trying to appeal to the other person to avoid the threat. It really looks like if I can appeal to this person who I perceive as a threat by anticipating their needs and going above and beyond to make them happy, I will be safe. I will finally achieve safety. And we know that that is not the case. It ends up just in us being burned out. Yeah.
They come higher. It's like, okay, I'm trying to ignore you and giving you the benefit of the doubt, and they'll just keep on like pushing at you.
It's true.
Why do you social workers often focus on the internal factors? Because as I mentioned with my counselor, she seemed to want to almost say it was me and how I was receiving things. Why don't they consider the external factors that are going on?
That's a great question. It's something I talk a lot about on my YouTube channel. Price MSW is my handle on YouTube. But I think it has a lot to do with the way that we're trained as social workers. And I'll say that I am not a clinical social worker. A clinical social worker puts you on the path to be a therapist. But I do have experience in like community mental health settings. But the mental health field, and this is one of my criticisms, tries to individualize mental health issues. So anxiety, depression, any other mental health issue that you're experiencing, it tries to put it on the person instead of zooming out to the larger factors that are at play in our society. And I think one of the reasons is because this implicates a lot of people who are leaders in the mental health field, who are developing these theories. They feel implicated when we start to talk about things like white supremacy and how that shows up and how that causes anxiety, depression, all sorts of other ills. When we talk about like poverty, the effects that that has on our mental health. These things are actually new in the field of social work in mental health settings, talking about how these affect our mental health. Because before it was just like, let's diagnose this person, let's give them medication, zoom out. What is this person experiencing on a day-to-day basis that's causing these issues? And I feel that it has been, Black social workers, Indigenous social workers really pushing this to the forefront, that we can't ignore what's happening in the external environment anymore, because all of this comes into a factor when we think about a whole person. It's not just a diagnosis that you can give out. We have to consider every factor in a person's life that's impacting them. So, yeah, but I think it has a lot to do with the way that we're trained and in the lack of education around how these external factors come into play.
So I remember viewing one of your videos, and you mentioned that you didn't realize what narcissistic abuse was. In the recent year, we've been hearing a lot about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. Is that a fairly new phenomenon, or is this something that they don't cover in social work training?
I'm not a clinical social worker, so to answer your question, I was not given this information about narcissistic abuse. This is something that I found on my own through YouTube. But I think like the issue is that narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis, and narcissism or narcissistic traits is like a way to describe someone. So I know coming across Dr. Ramani on YouTube, she always makes it a point to differentiate between the two. She's like, I'm not diagnosing anyone with this disorder, but I can absolutely for certain say that narcissistic tendencies and traits can pop up in anyone, and I'm able to identify them to protect myself going forward. So I think that's kind of like a point of tension in the mental health community. Are we diagnosing someone with this disorder? In which case, like people who are therapists, who have the clinical certification will say that they are the only ones who can make that determination, versus saying that someone has narcissistic traits, which any of us can identify based on a pattern of behavior. And in fact, it is helpful to have knowledge on how to identify, because we're dealing with so many people who are narcissistic in the world.
Now that I'm aware of it, which I've done a lot of like research on the topic, even wrote a book on it. Now that I'm aware of it, it's like you meet so many narcissists in the world, in your workplace, in your everyday life. And you know, this is not something people are weren't really aware of years ago. It's just really coming to the forefront. But but getting back to your workplace trauma, how were you able to resolve that situation?
I think leaving. So the first part was taking a sabbatical, using again FMLA leave, Family Medical Leave Act, and I took 11 weeks off of my job, and that was unpaid. So I have to say that that is a major issue in the US. We don't have a lot of ways to take paid time off from our jobs, especially not for mental health issues. Because mental health, it was.
Oh my God, because I had taken FMLA, but mine was, it started off at 100% and then it dropped down to 60%, but you didn't have any,
no.
Can I ask what's in?
Oh, actually North Carolina at the time.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's a good point, because I know it does vary state to state. But yeah, it was 11 weeks of unpaid leave, which was hard. I did apply for short-term disability, and that claim was denied because they told me I wasn't actually depressed. I'm like, that's funny. You don't know my symptoms. Yeah, and that goes back to like a video I did on my channel, Black Girl Depression. Our symptoms of depression don't show up a lot of the times like clinicians have on their list of symptoms to check for. So if they are going by those factors, of course, it's not going to show up the same way in me, because I'm still able to do my job, all these things that we think about how depression looks like. I'm still able to produce all these things, but behind the scenes, I'm struggling. Deeply. I'm spiraling into depression.
Black women are wonder women. I mean, that we can just take all this, and that we're never supposed to take a day off, or we're never supposed to show any weakness. It's just unfair.
It is. And it's dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing because, of course, I'm able to experience depression, even if it doesn't show up in the same way, because I have been socialized to just push through pain. That doesn't mean that I can't be depressed and be sad. It might just show up differently. Yeah.
I mentioned in my case that my counselor happened to be white. Do you think that they're culturally prepared to counsel Black clients?
Not always. In fact, the majority of the time I have to say no. No, having been in a master's program in social work, seeing behind the scenes of the ways that people are trained, and just really the lack of cultural understanding and humility in school settings. So you're sending people out into the field without telling them this is the history. I think that's so important. This is the history, especially if you're working in a place like the US. This is what has happened. And so people are not just people without a history and a culture that they are still reeling from, experiencing the effects of systemic discrimination and how that plays into mental health issues. So when you don't have an understanding of that, and when you feel implicated by someone sharing their real experiences, because it brings up feelings of guilt in you, you're going to try to gaslight them often. And we see this happening in therapeutic settings, which is deeply harmful. And I'm so glad that a lot of us are speaking out of this. Black social workers are speaking out. Like, no, if you don't have an understanding of the ways someone is being harmed right and left when they step out the door, right? And you're trying to work them through something like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, telling them to maybe just reframe this. Maybe you're thinking about this in the wrong way. No, I know when I'm being harmed. I know when I'm being harmed. In a therapeutic setting, it's supposed to be a safe space for someone to share what they are going through, and for you to properly be able to reflect back to them that what you're experiencing is real. You're not making it up. And this is the way that I can help you work through those feelings and realize that you're not alone. But when you're coming from the standpoint of immediately being defensive, which I see a lot of social workers, therapists, white social workers, therapists doing, taking a defensive stance already, all of a sudden this doesn't feel safe anymore. I don't feel safe to share what I'm going through, because now it's kind of like an opponent situation versus you supporting me and being open to what I'm sharing. So yeah.
So now I need to go find a Black therapist. That's what I need to do. All right. Let's see. What would you tell your younger self about what you face in that toxic environment?
This is a great question. I think I would tell her, you don't have to stay. You don't have to stay, because that's all I was taught my entire life. You have to stay and work through it and work harder, because I had internalized a lot of the things that were happening to me as if something was wrong with me. So it meant that I kind of shrunk and tried to morph myself into what I thought other people wanted me to be, how they wanted me to show up, getting quieter about the issues that were very important to me that I would normally speak up about. But all of a sudden I was starting to hold my tongue because it wasn't received well before, realizing that starting from the base of absolutely nothing is wrong with me. I was always enough. So once I start with that, like if I had started with that, I would have left that environment so quickly. But it's the fear. It's feeling like maybe, again, the fawn trauma response, maybe I can appeal to these folks who are bullying me. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I can try to do something differently. Maybe I can work a little bit harder. Maybe I can take on additional roles, another group, another community at work, because these workplaces get Black women to lead these initiatives for free. So often, a lot of these DEI initiatives, we are tasked, we're given as if it's a privilege outside of our job responsibilities and roles. Realizing I don't have to do any of that. I can live a life of ease. And I think Stephanie Perry has been pivotal in being able to teach me that just through watching her videos. My life can be easy and I don't have to take on additional work, and I can leave somewhere that's harming me. I don't have to stay.
And so how has moving to Mexico improved your mental health?
Oh, yeah, I think like immensely. Just being around people who are kind, because sometimes that's rare depending on where you are in the US. Being around people who are supportive. I'm still learning the language, still becoming fluent, hopefully, in Spanish at some point. But having people around me that willingly work with me, that actually want to hear what I have to say, made me realize that I was never the problem again. That point, that first trip outside of the US was life-changing. And I hope to be able to work with other people who are interested in making that first trip abroad, because that trip will change your life. Everything that you had been experiencing, suppressing, maybe it is me, you realize, no, it's been the environment the entire time, because people want to hear, they want to hear you, they want to get to know you in Mexico. And so being in that environment, not to say that it's a utopia, because there are still issues of anti-Blackness, classism is big in Mexico. But just, yeah, having the people around me who are open, who are willing to get to know me, who see me for me, has been really healing. Yeah.
How do you think it's different from the United States?
It's a slower pace. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's a much slower pace of life. And that's something I've had to unlearn, being a recovering type A person who had to have like everything in line, scheduled, realizing that things get done at their own time. I don't have to keep my foot on the gas all the time. I can let it off and things won't fall apart. I'm a recovering perfectionist too, recovering straight A student, which brought on so much trauma, trying to get all the accolades externally, get all the degrees, really realizing that I was always enough. I don't have to seek those things if I don't want to anymore. And not having that pressure to do that. I think that's one of the biggest differences. Because I see people here, it's like, no, you're human, you're fine as you are. You don't have to get all these labels and stuff that we're taught to seek to be validated. Like, come as you are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm always watching your videos. And I remember when did you realize that my getting a degree is not going to make me look any better in their eyes?
Yeah. I think honestly, I'm still learning that, still like really getting into that, that no, more credentials is not the way. Because it'll probably be once a week that I'm like, should I get a PhD? And I have to remind myself, girl, you did a whole video. Go back and watch your video. They're not going to look at you as, okay, now you're finally human. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Now you're finally worthy. That will never come. It has to come from it within. That's the only permanent place that I can rely on, that can come from telling myself that I'm worthy and that I'm enough. So that what made me realize that is just seeing it's really not about any of that, because those degrees trigger people's insecurities even more. So now all of a sudden we're even more of a threat, and it's more of a shock to the system because we've spent all this time, we've dedicated so much energy to being the leaders, to being knowledgeable, to being subject matter experts. And it's just met with such vitriol at every angle. So it's really like coming into the radical acceptance that this won't change, but I can leave that environment and create a new life where I don't have to deal with any of that. The US is not my only option.
Okay. And I know that you have a new book out called Cocoon Transformation. Tell me about your book.
Yeah, so this is a book that was, I kind of say like divinely inspired, because it was affirmations that I had written to myself in the process of realizing that I was in a toxic job, and then healing from the process, exiting, all of that. And it was through being in Alicia Renice's community, the garden of other Black women creatives, and her really giving a piece of advice. It can be easy as taking what you have in your notes app and putting that into a book. And that's exactly what I did. I followed her advice because, again, a lot of us have been taught that things have to be hard. When we want to create something, it has to be complicated. It has to be like have all these parts, putting it into a book and releasing it to the world. So that's what I did. It's a series of affirmations that I wrote to myself as I was, healing from the trauma that I experienced in that job. And it's called Cocoon Affirmations for Transformation.
Okay, and we'll put the link in the description. But tell our audience where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Yes, my handle is mprice, MSW. Instagram as well, mprice, MSW. My website is mpricemsw.com. You can always send me an email, hello@mpricemsw. Yeah.
You're very inspiring. And again, thank you for coming by and talking to me. And what do you have going on next? I know that there's a summit coming up.
Yeah. So I'll be co-hosting the Job Liberation Virtual Summit with Dr. Kamani, who, like I said, introduced me to the concept of toxic job, because I didn't have any idea of what I was experiencing. I thought I was the only one.
The first episode I saw had Dr. Kamani, Anne-Marie, and Stephanie Corey, and it was about toxic jobs. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not by myself. Oh, it was such a relief. I'm telling you, because you feel like you're going through all this by yourself and no one's experiencing this. And then to find out that Black women experience this on a regular was just mind-blowing for me. And it made me feel supported in a sense, you know,
Mhm.
that it wasn't just
Absolutely.
me, that I wasn't doing something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can feel so isolating. It can feel so isolating. This is kind of like a movement for getting free of toxic jobs, because there are other options for you.
Yeah.
When you are in the situation of maybe experiencing depression, you're not even able to see a way forward all the time.
This is true.
So yeah, being able to be in communities like this, hosting the summit coming up. Stephanie Perry and Anne Marie are both speakers at the summit happening May 18th and 19th. Yes, but we're going to be providing practical healing tips if you are recovering from a toxic job, healing from the aftermath, as well as practical exit planning strategies if you are still in a toxic job. Dr. Kamani and I will be leading a session on how to start your business using the skill set that you already have. You don't have to seek out additional credentials. Both of us have done that. Yeah, Stephanie Perry is going to be kicking off the summit talking about how to detox from a toxic job, reading excerpts from her new book. Anne Marie is going to be talking about how to leverage discrimination to cash out and pursue your dreams on day 2 of the summit. So yeah, this will be life-changing, and it is information that I wish I had when I was in a toxic job.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. And would you do us a favor and close us out using one of the affirmations from your book?
Yeah, I will. So yes, I chose this one because I thought this fit perfectly today. But this is from Cocoon Affirmations for Transformation. I can go back and retrieve parts of myself that I lost along the way.
I can go back to retrieve parts of myself that I lost along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I'm definitely in the process of trying to retrieve parts of myself. I feel like the toxic work environments that I've been in taken a lot away from me, both
Yes.
spiritually, mentally, and physically. So that is very much apropos.
Yeah.
So thanks again for stopping by.
Oh,
And
thank you.
be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you need to contact me for any of my consulting services, I can be reached at narcslayer@gmail.com. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.